Welcome, fellow dreamers, to a mesmerizing new chapter of the Horror Chronicles. Prepare to be whisked away on a mind-bending journey, where reality and dreams intertwine in ways beyond comprehension. Our tale revolves around a haunting nightmare, a lamb-headed being, and a quest to unearth the enigmatic dimensions of the dream world. Join us as we delve into the uncharted territories of lucid dreaming, astral travel, and the mysteries of the mind. As the boundaries between the conscious and the subconscious blur, brace yourselves for a narrative that defies time and perception. We will continue after the short break. One morning, I woke up excited. I had a strange nightmare, where a being with a human body and a lamb's head was chasing me to cut me with a scythe. It was indeed a recurring nightmare. It was not strange for me to wake up in the middle of the night with a loud pulse because of bad dreams. But this time, when I opened my eyes to reality, the sun had already risen, and I had to go to work. In the morning, I told my partner, Adriana, about the nightmare over the phone, who frequently talked to me about something that, to me, until then, was nothing more than an interesting conversation, but a subject I did not consider real. Journeys within dreams, the possibility of our soul traveling upon sleep to worlds unknown, where the laws of reality are quite different from those in the plane of what we take to be normal, concepts of the fourth, fifth, sixth dimension, and besides. These are things that are very hard to grasp for me, someone who doesn't live a religious life, or spiritual, but when I have this nightmare where I find myself in a deserted and half-ruined city, with places full of mud, where there are pigs with human bodies, a fat man chasing after me with his axe and with a lamb's head, the interest and curiosity to know more about all this wakes me up. In the morning until noon I studied, and the afternoons were free. I started reading books on lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis, and even astral travel, since I was a kid, and everything about it seemed fantastic to me. Do that, until the age of 20, and when the nightmare was recurring, it was that I began to take more seriously the investigation of what was happening when dreaming. All the sources I consulted indicated the same thing. Sleep is divided into 5 parts. The first is light and relatively easy to feel, numbness, when the muscles begin to relax and the eye movements are slow. Then light sleep follows. The pulse and breathing are slow. The body is completely relaxed and the eye movements are slight or non-existent. The third stage is transition, when there is stimulation of really deep sleep. Later on, it is deep sleep, in which we usually have dreams that we remember shortly after waking up. In the final stage, REM sleep, where the body uses rest as more, and where dreams are more intense and remain recorded in memory. Also where nightmares and dreams are often vivid and affect breathing and heart rate. Having learned this, I had the intention of inducing lucid dreams, so that I would lose the nightmare fear that had tormented me intermittently and suddenly for several months. I didn't go very far on my own, but Adriana told me that she knew Bulma, a friend of her mother's friend, who could help me in my quest. I went to her, accompanied by my friend, but she, for reasons that I do not understand, and this is not explained to me, either had to wait outside the room where this kind of ritual was performed, which would lead me to a more lucid access to dreams. I lay on a cot, and there was weed and smoke, and music made up of bells ringing in different colors, and I managed to fall asleep quickly, and I didn't dream at all, and I didn't have any kind of waking or waking up, which I expected, but Bulma didn't have a little, or he didn't have anything. He explained to me about the process. Sooner rather than later, I realized this was a scam. Before leaving the place, the shaman told me, "Remember, when you are awake in your dreams, never ask what time it is, nor mention that you know that you are in a dream. If you do not violate any of these two rules, everything will go well, and you will come out safely." At that point, my confidence in women was low, because I felt nothing promised worked, and the justification for nothing happening was that I didn't have an open mind enough to go into the experience she promised me, in the end. That afternoon, I walked out with Adriana to eat, and every day after that was relatively normal. Until the fifth night, I slept without expecting anything special to happen, but when I woke up, I was not in my room, but in a strange place. I was on the roof of a building, in a strange city. There were huge boulders hanging in the air, like some structures, houses and buildings below. People and cars were passing by quite normally. No one was surprised by the things that rose in the air, with the atmosphere suspended in the middle of nowhere. I looked for a way out through the roof, but there was nothing. It was just a concrete base in a building. There was nothing else or a clear way to get to where I woke up. Everything seemed so real, but at the same time, I realized it wasn't awake. And the funny thing was, she didn't feel like she was asleep either. I closed my eyes, and noticed that my body was beginning to become lighter, and soon my feet were no longer touching the ground, and when I realized this, I stepped onto the concrete of the ceiling again. It was fun figuring out what I could and couldn't do. It was like starting to ride a bike and realizing the possibilities around you when learning a new skill. Everything was exhilarating and free, but there was a strange feeling in the air. Not fishy or uncomfortable, just unusual for me naturally. I soon learned to keep my body up high, like rocks and buildings visible in the distance. I descended from the roof slowly, like a helium balloon running out of the gas that keeps it up. And when I got to the street, people simply ignored me, passed me by, and I looked like any of them, and that they simply preferred to ignore that I came flying, and that was ironic to me, and I started to laugh, and people just passed by, and some saw me for a few seconds with a serious expression, but nothing else. It was incredible, like having powers, because it's a world of dreams. I felt the truth. I touched my skin with my hands, and I felt the warmth inside. I felt the depth in my vision, the clothes clinging to my body, the warmth of the shoes on my feet. It was so much fun. I have so much freedom in my body and in physics. I started jumping several meters through the streets, then I flew with some effort, touched the ground for a few meters, but each time I could get higher, there was a point where I jumped and stayed suspended in the air for several minutes. It was floating. It was so relaxing. I felt like a cloud in the sky. No one paid me any attention, and it was amazing. It was like invisible. The feeling was so relaxing that I decided to stay floating and not explore anymore. I don't remember much after that. Then I woke up. I opened my eyes. I was in my bed again. I woke up excited and told Melia everything over the phone. She was a little scared, because she thought it didn't work, but she was just as excited when she realized that she could put an end to the nightmares that were recurring. The next night, before I fell asleep, I thought of where I wanted to go, to that city ruined with mud and anthropomorphic animals. It terrified me, for everything seemed so real in dreams, but for me it was necessary to recognize that. It didn't scare me anymore, to be able to do something inside there. I didn't know what exactly it was, but I was determined to go and explore it. Sooner rather than later, I fell asleep. I was not in the place I had in mind, but in the corridor. It was an elegant place, carpeted on the floor and ceiling, and there were golden chandeliers hanging above, and the walls were patterned in the colors of cherry and platinum. And there were the doors of the sides made of dark oak, and the frames made of gold, and at the end of the corridor a large door made of the same materials. I began to walk towards her, and the doors opened on both sides. Many people began to come out of them, men and women in suits and dresses. When I saw a lot of people around me, I noticed that the corridor was much larger than I had imagined at first. It was a very wide corridor where there was room for many people. People who appeared were walking in all directions. I walked towards the front, heading towards the doors at the end of the corridor. I felt that this dream was very different from the previous one. Here, I was not completely free. There was no feeling that I had powers. However, I felt everything more in my body. My feet ached from fatigue. I did not realize it, but I had already walked for a long time. However, the door a few meters in front of me didn't seem to be any closer. I was walking on without getting anywhere, and I started to run, but even at such an accelerated pace, I wasn't getting anywhere near. Even the door of the door I was trying to reaching, it seemed so far away. I began to feel terrible despair, and I had the feeling that I had been there for a long time, and I did not know whether minutes or hours had passed, but it was still clear to me that I was inside a dream. People started to disappear. I don't know where they went, but out of hundreds of people, there are only a few dozen left, and the hallway is getting smaller. All of a sudden, I had a somewhat irrational fear of spending so much time in there. I thought I might have fallen into some sort of coma, and wouldn't be able to wake up. I remembered going to bed around 11 at night, however. I started to feel like he had spent days inside the strange dream. Which hour? Which hour? Which hour? Which hour? Which hour? Which hour? It was constantly repeating in my head. I desperately wanted to know how much time had passed inside this endless passage. And without realizing it, I was already repeating the question out loud. The people around me were staring at me with very strange looks, as if they had discovered a dark secret about me, as if I was hiding. My psyche was finally revealed. I started running while everyone was watching me. This time I managed to move on. People in suits started chasing me, but I got to the dark oak door with the golden frame in time. I opened it, and after that, I don't remember anything else. I woke up excited, sweating. It was terrible, as if I really came from that place. I only slept for an hour and a half, and the dream was eternal. It was early morning, so I didn't talk to Nelia to tell her. Until the next morning. That night, I could no longer sleeping for fear of going into another nightmare. Felt a very long time. I didn't want to go back to this strange world. I was afraid of realizing that whole days go by a few minutes. I started to worry about going into a coma, sleeping for months without waking up. The worst thing is that sleep is inevitable, and sooner or later it will have those weird nightmares again. In the morning, I told Adriana everything. And in the afternoon, we went to see Bulma. The woman told me I had to keep quiet in my nightmares, even if they were very vivid, and I didn't have to think about the time. That the weather there is relative, or rather, it's a decade apart. It exists, because the dimension of dreams, which is reached in the REM stage, is completely foreign to what we know when we are awake. The Santeria did another ritual with me, which would nullify the lucid dreams, and return me to normal dreams, but something was inevitable, another nightmare. She told me I had to root out the problem of recurring nightmares, or else I could never sleep peacefully again, without no choice but to accept. We finished the ritual, and the era began to die. Adriana stayed with me, watching my sleep, and told her to wake me if I slept too much, though that would be a contraindication to what the Santera said, who said that sleep during a nightmare should not be interrupted. It took longer than usual, but I managed to fall asleep. I woke up in a REM stage dream, lying on the floor of a street full of mud. It was night, and the surrounding buildings were in ruins. It was a post-apocalyptic scenario, and I knew this was where my recurring nightmares were. I began walking through the desolate streets, and soon I found a barn, in which there were pig men, crouching on the ground, eating something. I didn't want to get too close, but there was a light coming from within the building that wasn't destroyed like the others, and soon I knew I had to go into that place. I immediately passed the corral. The swine men ignored me. The worst thing was that I realized what they were eating. They were cutting off parts of people, Corpses, arms, legs, heads of human beings. It was disgusting and terrifying at the same time. Inside the building, I followed a path of burning candles. I realized I was in the corridor from the previous dream, but this time, it was a ruin. The floor and walls were shattered. It seemed like centuries had passed since I was there, or maybe it was just an identical place, but this place was very careless. There was an unlit candle, taped to one of the hallway doors. I opened it, and came to a very different place, a butcher shop. This shop was relatively clean. There was a musty smell, but it didn't seem like a deserted place. I walked towards the place where the meat was being cut, and found the figure that was haunting me constantly, that fat man, with the sheep's head who was trying to reach me in my nightmares. The creature was cutting meat on a metal table. In a corner of the room, there was a small pile of women's underwear. There was a lot of blood on the floor. The butcher's side was completely drenched in blood. He turned his animal's head and saw me. In that motion, he let me see what he was chopping on the chrome metal table. They were little girls' bodies, no more than 7 or 8 years old. It was horrible. I saw hair, teeth, fingers. I really wanted to vomit. And I started running in the same direction that I had reached, but the path completely changed. It was in a kind of maze that was constantly changing. The floor and walls were dirty tiles, like the ones in the bathroom. I ran in desperation, and began to leave the man behind, a lamb's head, but I began to feel dizzy, my vision blurred, my steps became very slow and heavy, and without realizing I had fallen to the ground. When I woke up, I was in a very dirty kitchen. In front of me, the man with an animal head was doing things, chopping meat and cutting arms and legs from inert bodies. I was tied to the wall by leather straps. I was horrified to see all that man did. I was so shocked to see him in front of me, and to witness how his sickle cuts the flesh of the dead. The sound of cutting bones, cartilage, and ligaments was the worst. It dug into my head, and I could not cover my eyes, my ears. Time passed. A lot, actually. I don't know how long, but my body began to change. I think it took more than 30 years, and every day, I felt like a real person. Those 3 decades I was tied to the wall with leather belts. I didn't eat or drink. I didn't sleep. I didn't rest. I only see the man cutting corpses, as it has been for years, for life. One day, I was crying. When he realized this, he turned to see me, but ignored me, and I saw his difference in the face of my suffering, and began to wonder about something very important at that very moment. Why does a person who doesn't care about me have full rights over my feelings? At what point was this power given to this strange man? After that thought popped inside my head, the sheepman seemed scared. I thought this might be related to my way out of there, though honestly, after so many years of sticking to the wall of that kitchen, I no longer knew if he was in a nightmare or in real life. The Aries guy stared at me. Then I called him, and spoke to him for the first time since seeing him. It didn't really cross my mind, but that day, I don't know for what reason, started to see things differently. He did so carefully, and when he was close enough to me, I said 2 words that made the leather straps disappear from my wrists and ankles. The lamb began to scream deafeningly, slashing its body with the machetes it was carrying. And then I realized I was no longer bound by the straps. The man fell to the ground dead by his hand, and I walked towards the exit. It was raining outside. The mud in the street was beginning to roll in, and the pig men ran out of the barn. There was a door that had not been there before, a dark oak door with a golden frame, which seemed to lead nowhere. However, I decided to open it, and took the handle by which I got up. The TV was on and the room was dark, lit only by the screen, which was broadcasting an advertisement in the distance. Next to me was Adriana, my friend. Sleeping next to me, I saw the time, and only 2 hours had passed since I had been able to fall asleep. 2 hours. I had felt more than 30 years in that nightmare. Terrible. I was so tired and wanted to continue sleeping. I hugged Adriana from behind, and within seconds, I fell asleep again, this time without the fear of nightmares again. The next morning, I told my partner the whole dream, and told him about how it felt like I spent 30 years there, but it was such a relief to come back to reality. Months later, my mom told me we were moving, and we started packing everything up. We wouldn't go far, just to another part of town where the streets were safer, where crime increased, and that worried her a lot. 2 months later, while unpacking, I discovered a box full of papers, documents, and pictures, many of which were unknown to me, and most of them broken and full of dust. My mother told me that she could throw the box away, and that she did not know why she kept them there. Out of pure curiosity, I began to look at the pictures, and found a man who was in a field, and behind him you could see a pen full of lambs, in his right hand aside. He seemed to be trying to hide for the picture. It was evident that he was a man of my nightmares. I entered the house with the picture, and asked my mother who this person was. Her gesture changed radically. There was a strange surprise on her face, and she told me that if she didn't remember who it was. I answered no. She looked into my eyes and told me it was my father. Thank you for watching.